Hi folks. Well, I haven't given a garden update for this year yet, so I thought I'd give you just a quick overview of what I've been doing for the 2023 garden. Normally I'd walk through the rows with you and show you more close-up things, but I got a lot of muddy soil right now. We're in a weather period now where it's very humid and sticky, and one minute we're getting a brief thunderstorm or rainstorm, and then the next 10 minutes later the sun's out bright again. It's great for growing, but I can't get in to do much weeding or anything else right now, or even walking through it, so I'll just do it from the outside here. I ran the tiller through this garden, I think it was early last week, so I managed to get some of the weeds knocked down, but not quite everything. But at any rate, I wanted to show you what I've been up to. Of course, the most intensive time-intensive part of the planting are the tomato plants. I have 40 tomato plants in these two sets of trellises here. I have videos from last year, the first year I decided to trellis the tomatoes, so if you want to learn more about that, you can go back through and take a look at them. So I just left them in from last year. I didn't do anything with it. In the spring I went through with the tiller. Well, I got all the old tomato plants out of there, you know, the leftover stems and stuff like that. Prior to that, ran the tiller through once or twice just to soften up the soil, and then I dug holes for my transplants. I didn't start these tomato plants from seeds. I got them at my local nursery greenhouse. They do a sale every Mother's Day where they sell, I can get a tray of 24 plants for like 16 bucks. So I'm not going to turn that. It's not worth my time to spend putting seeds in potting soil and water them, and for 2 months to try to get them to grow when I get them for those prices. What I've got growing here, they were packs of 6, so I think I did some variety here. I've got, and I don't know if these are in particular order, but I've got beefsteak, I've got big boy, I've got super steak, and I think big beef. I think I have 4 large varieties, and that's mostly these 2 rows here and on this side of the trellis here. On the far end, the last 6 plants out there, not quite. There's two extras out there, 1 extra out there on that side. I'll tell you that in a second. But I have 6. I think they're called Great 100s. They're a cherry tomato, but they have a like the stems have multi lobes on for the tomatoes to grow, so you can pick a whole bunch at a time. They're heavy bearing, so I wanted to try those instead of the grape tomatoes this year. Here I have half a dozen Rutgers. It's more of a slicing salad tomato, so I like those. Then I went back to the greenhouse, was doing some other shopping there, and they had 4 little pitiful tomato plants left over. 2 were, I think, Super Steak, and 2 were Jet Star. So I think the one on the end here and the one on the end on the left side down there are the 2 Jet Star. They're supposed to be another type of slicing tomato. I've never had them before, but I thought, try it. I had a little bit of room left on my trellises here, so I filled them out. And as last year, I started a little earlier this year to tie them up so that they would grow a bit better. I may have to come through and do a second tie on them as they're getting more bushy now. I didn't use any of those chemical fertilizers that I used last year when my tomato plants turned blue or purple. Didn't have to because I got them planted. These I put in the ground, I want to say the last week of May. It was right before Memorial Day. We've had such miserable weather here this spring, or unpredictable. I shouldn't say miserable, but it was warm early. Then we had some cold nights with frost late, and then once we get into May, we had a drought. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't put the plants out too early. I think the one night it got down to 37 after they were out, and I was nervous about that, but they didn't freeze, so did okay with that. Now I'll talk about that a little later, but so they've been in since then. I have hit them once with Miracle-Gro fertilizer for tomato plants, mixed it with water and applied it right to the base of the plants. Then I also put newspapers down around them and then finished it off with the hay that you see there to mulch them like I did last year. They've taken off with this weather. I also had to, right after I planted them, within a week, with maybe a few days, I had to start watering because it got so hot and dry earlier in May, or well, the very end of May, early in June, that I was afraid I was going to lose them right away. They started to droop. And I've never had to water right after I put plants out like this before, but that was the kind of weather we had. Now, since then, the last week and a half here or so, maybe close to 2 weeks now, we're getting more rain with these storms coming through, so I haven't had to water, and with the humidity and the amount of sun we are getting in between the storms, they're growing very well. I do have, let me see here, I don't know if you can see down the row there are a couple plants that have good sized green tomatoes on. They're going to be the big ones, so they're going to grow a bit. I know I have some green tomatoes down with the cherry tomatoes. I've got to go and check them, see if I have any ripening yet. I should have tomatoes within a week or so with at least the early cherry tomatoes, which is pretty early for me, but you know, they're just cherry tomatoes. But everything's looking good. I had a little bit of problem with some early blight. Part of that I think is because I was watering in the evenings and shouldn't have been. I tried to when I water, I always try to just water around the base of the plants and not get the leaves wet, but there were a few lower leaves that had some early blight spots on, so I pruned those off. I've been watching some videos about pruning tomato plants. First time I've ever tried that, so we'll see if that keeps it in check. If not, I've got some other solutions to start spraying them with to keep the blight down. But at this point, they all look pretty healthy. They're all starting to blossom very well, and I'm happy with the way the crop is looking at this point. I also, from the same greenhouse, got half a dozen pickle and cucumber vines, and they are growing very well. You can see there's some blossoms on them. I don't have cucumbers yet, but they're blossoming, which means it won't be long. This corner of the garden is the most well fertilized because when my wife cleans out our chicken coop over here, she just dumps the straw and the manure right in this corner. At the beginning of gardening season, I got my dump cart and filled it up and hauled it up to the upper garden where I have the corn and the vine crops and used a lot of the fertilizer there. But there's still an abundance of it that from sitting here, so anything in this corner of the garden is going to grow like crazy because of all the chicken manure. At any rate, down in the distance, well, I'll walk around to it so you can see it a little better. I had a small section of the garden left over. I mean, I'm showing you the end of the garden before I show you the more main features, I guess, but I'm closest here. I had a small section left over, so I thought what I would do is I'd put in a few short rows of popcorn. You can see it is coming up. I didn't till in between the other day because it wasn't up high enough yet. I wanted to wait until it got a good start before I ran the tiller through. I didn't want to bury any of the little seedlings coming up. But you can see now the grass, the weeds and the grass is really getting there. So once things dry out a little bit, maybe by next week, I can get back in here and get everything tilled again. This popcorn is from Landis Valley Museum in Lancaster, Pennsylvania's heirloom seed program. This is probably 5-6-year-old seed from previous years of planting popcorn. The seeds they sell there are not hybrids, so you can harvest the seeds from one year's crop and use it for the next and so on. I don't know how many times I've replanted seeds from crops. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know these were in just the bag that we keep our popcorn for eating in. And they did come up even after that many years. So there is something to be said about heirloom seeds. At any rate, well, let me come around and show you. I think we got some rain coming in here again. Yeah, I might get chased in before I get this video done, but just wanted to give you a sense. And this is the way it's been these last several days. 1 minute there's not a cloud in the sky, it's 85 degrees and beautiful. And then 15 minutes later the wind picks up, the dark clouds roll in, the storms rumble through. Thank God we haven't had anything too severe or serious. And this is kind of ideal growing conditions for the farm because they're getting plenty of rain. And also then there's sun in between. This is a row of broccoli. They're coming very well. These also came from the greenhouse. I have 12 broccoli plants in here, and when I first planted them, I thought I was losing them. The leaves were gone, and I realized I had some holes over in the back corner of the garden there under the fencing that I think the rabbits were getting in there, eating the tops of the broccoli off. Some of these were just little sticks sticking up, just little stems. I thought there's no way they're coming back, but I watered them, and as you can see, they're leafing out very well. In the back there, I'll show you when I go around, I have half a dozen eggplant plants, also from that greenhouse. 4 there and then 2 over on the other side. It's not that we like eggplant that much, but my wife has been trying to give our chickens some vegetables to kind of to peck away at. She'll get, if she gets cheap cabbage at the grocery outlet or whatever, she'll put one in there and puts it in a basket up a little bit, and they peck away at it. It gives them something to do, and of course they love the vegetables. So we thought we'd grow some of our own. This row is a dozen sweet peppers. Again, from the greenhouse. So these were all transplants. They're doing very well. Now, pepper plants, always for me, they kind of just sit there for the first half of the summer, and then you get towards the end of the summer, they suddenly explode and produce peppers. Don't ask me why, but that's just what I've found here. So they're doing great, considering they have grown some since I put them in. They're double size, at least from when I put them in. So they're doing fine with that. This next row is wax beans, golden wax beans. I've got to do some hoeing in there and tilling in there, but they're coming up pretty well. When I planted some of this stuff, the seeds in the ground, they sat there for 3 weeks and didn't do anything because it was so dry. It was warm, but the soil was so dry they wouldn't germinate. Suddenly we get a little bit of rain, and voila, we get plants growing. Same thing over along here, front and back. I have pole beans, Blue Lake pole beans, the green beans, again to trellis them here. Last year I just trellised on the one side. This year I'm trying on both sides. On this side I tried to plant the beans in line with the vertical pieces of steel going up in the grid, and then the other side I went in between so that they're kind of alternated through so that they wouldn't bunch up too much. I'll let you know how it goes. Again, that's the first time I've tried that. I just did 1 row last year. This year I'm doubling it, so we'll see. Over in here I did that thing I've been doing. I can't remember her name, Ruth somebody in the 1940s came up with this method of gardening where you just kind of throw the stuff on the ground and then cover it with a lot of hay, and it germinates that way. There are lots of videos out there if you're interested. Go ahead. And I don't know if I'm doing exactly the way she did it either, but I ran the tiller over the soil here once or twice just to break it up so that it was easier for the things to germinate, and then I covered it with this is just regular old hay got from my son a few years ago. I have bales in the barn that'll last me for a few more years of gardening, I guess. I already see I don't quite have enough there because there are some weeds coming up, but it's mostly for weed control. The advantage with the hay is it's putting nutrients into the soil. It's trapping the moisture, so it's keeping them moisturized, if you want to use that term, or well watered. I was watering over top of the hay when I was watering the rest of the garden, so I was adding extra to it. Nothing was up at that point yet, but as you can see, I've got a fair amount of onions coming up here now. 3 varieties of onions I got. Yellow onions, sweet onions, and the purple or red onions. So we'll see what we get with that. And I didn't really, with these, I didn't put them in nice neat rows. There's no need to. I just kind of scattered them out there, tried to keep them separated enough so they weren't on top of each other, but it was not necessary to put them in rows since they're just under the soil. Boy, it is getting dark. All right, let's go on here to more the end of the garden, and I'll wrap up this video. Potatoes. My potatoes are doing very well so far. Same thing, just got seed potatoes, threw them on the ground, covered them with hay, and I got I have these are white potatoes. I think they're Evas I got at a feed store. I also found some Yukon Gold, which is the variety I like to plant. Most of the stores didn't have them, but I did find some. And then I had some leftover potatoes that my wife just didn't use up, that she got at the discount grocery place, that started to form eyes. So I'm not sure what variety they were. They're not russets, but they're potatoes that we've used for eating, you know, obviously. So they're coming up. It's a bit more sporadic. I think these were the white potatoes here that germinated the best, but I am getting some others here that are coming a little later. So we'll see what happens with them. Again, near the end of the growing season, after these plants blossom and then wither up and die off, then the potatoes are ready. And then you can get into the straw, pull the straw, or it's hay, excuse me, it's not straw, it's hay. Oh, there goes a deer running. I thought I saw a little fawn running a minute ago. Lots of wildlife out here. And then you can pull them out of the ground and ready to go. Now, two things. Number one, you don't want to do it when it's sunny. So do it when it's a very overcast day or an evening after the sun goes down, because if the potatoes hit direct sunlight, causes a chemical reaction, they turn green, and then they're not that good anymore. So you want to keep them out of the sun. Second of all, you do not wash potatoes after you harvest them. Leave the dirt on until you're ready to cook them, because that keeps them preserved. You wash, you remove some of the protective film over the skin, and then they just don't keep. What I did last year, and I had potatoes even this summer, early summer, at least into the spring, from last year. When I harvested them, I put them in cheap burlap bags, just like the $2 bags you get at Tractor Supply. For the rest of the warm months, I put them in the bottom of the barn where it was cool and dark, so there's no sun. They weren't going to get, you know, rotted because of the heat. And then when it started to get cold, I put them into one of the rooms in the basement floor of the house that is not heated. It's enclosed. It doesn't freeze, but the temperatures are cooler in the 50s. And also I hung them from the rafters in a corner where there'd be no direct sunlight hitting them as it came in the windows. And every time I wanted to make potatoes, all I had to do is go grab the bag, pull it down off the rafter, pull out what I needed, and then hang the bag back up. It worked very well last year, so I'm going to try that again this year. So that's just a tip if you want to try something like that. But I know potatoes aren't all that expensive to buy, but it's great having your own homemade ones. They really have good flavor. So I think that's about it with the garden. I think I'm soon going to get drenched on here if I don't wrap up this video. So I will come back to you later in the summer with more updates on the garden. I'm also not going to bother to show you the upper garden yet, because that was very late getting in. It was so hard that, and my bigger Alice tractor is down right now with a flat tire, and rear tire, of course, wouldn't be easy. So I had to use my tiller. The ground was so hard it was like trying to till asphalt. I literally had to take 8 to 10 passes down the same row with the tiller to get the ground soft enough, even down 4 or 5 inches, to be able to get seeds in. So that's on behind. I'll come back to you to show you the sweet corn and the other vine crops that are up in the upper garden a little later. But thank you for watching. I appreciate your support, and I'll come back to you as we continue to live out in the country on a shoestring.